Hey folks, Mark Levin here. Now, before we dive into today's episode, I want to talk about something truly valuable, protecting your financial future with gold. It's called diversification. Now, for that, I only trust Advantage Gold. They're the real deal with 5-star service and a sterling reputation. So give them a call today. Call Advantage Gold at 800-900-8000. Tell them Mark Levin sent you. Trust me, you'll thank yourself in the future. Now let's get to the show. Results may vary. Consult with your financial professional.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. Well, I feel exactly the way you do. And we should feel this way. And once we're done feeling this way, we dust ourselves off. We put on the political and legal brass knuckles, and we never say, Uncle. Not now, not ever. There's been enough talk on TV and radio to make it abundantly clear that we had a crooked judge, a crooked prosecutor, and an overwhelmingly liberal Democrat jury pool. This case should have been dismissed, at least summary judgment. And once that door was open, we knew it would be difficult, didn't we? The judge was handpicked. He's not even a full-fledged permanent judge. He's an acting judge. And this judge has been picked for every Trump-related case in New York City. Every single one. Trump Organization, Bannon, Trump himself. That's not by accident. This judge should have recused himself, but he didn't. We knew that was a problem. He should have moved the venue to a more balanced community when selecting the jury pool, but he wouldn't. We knew that was a problem. He ruled repeatedly for the prosecution and against the defense on material issues. We knew that was a problem. He showed anger toward the defense counsel when they sought to defend their witness and raise substantive issues, and he let the prosecution ramble on and on and on. We knew that was a problem. The jury instructions could have been written by any Marxist, any hanging judge. He gave this jury 100 different ways to convict the former president, and he also withheld critical testimony and information. He interrupted Robert Costello, the key witness in challenging Cohen. He prevented Brad Smith, one of the nation's experts on the federal election law, from testifying. He allowed in collateral evidence, as we revealed here, that is, evidence that shows, quote-unquote, a pattern, but is not probative. In fact, it is destructive of due process. When Trump says he's an innocent man, this was rigged, he's correct. You really don't need me or any lawyers to tell you how corrupt this is. But in the end, we need to rally to the cause. Does this not underscore the point that we must win this election? Does this not underscore the point that we must put people in positions of power who love the country, who will follow the rule of law, the Constitution, and our traditions? Does this not underscore the point? What happens if we don't win the next election? This is an election between good and evil, between right and wrong, between justice and injustice. Democrats are giddy with joy. Their goal is to imprison Donald Trump. They've interfered with the election process. They form shopped. They found the city. They found the prosecutor. They found the judge. And they got their jury. Now, this will have consequences, enormous, grave consequences. First of all, it will embolden more of these Democrat judges, both in Fulton County, Washington, D.C., Chutkan. They're going to feel righteous. They're going to feel that they have to stand between the country and Hitler. They're going to feel that they have an obligation as a judge to deliver a Biden victory. And in order to deliver a Biden victory, you must twist the law. You must use your power as a judge to pave the way for the prosecutors. You don't charge a former president who's running for president with cockamamie, fictionalized crimes. We talked about that many, many times, didn't we? So what does Trump do? Well, I have a view. It's a little complicated. And it would involve not just the Bush versus Gore decision, but how do you get a case to the Supreme Court from a state trial court? It's not normal. It's not normal. I've been looking at some research done, for instance, at the Yale Law Review, federal court review by extraordinary writ. They write, to invoke common law writs, that is, not statutory-based writs, but common law-based writs. That is, really, matters of equity, I suppose. As instruments of review, a litigant must show that ordinary channels of appeal offer them no adequate remedy. The appeal may be non-existent. The lower court action may have obstructed it where it is available. Or thirdly, where appeal is available and unobstructed, the lower court's order may be abnormally detrimental to one party. That would seem to fit this case, would it, Mr. Producer? because it might take 3 months, they say, to get a sentence. But Trump can appeal in 30 days. In my view, I don't know the New York appellate process, but I'm sure there is an emergency process. He should do that. And if the court doesn't rule, and he seeks emergency ruling from the highest court in New York, and they don't rule, then he's got a final determination, or it's final enough. You can certainly make a strong or colorable argument to try and get to the Supreme Court. That said, what's extraordinary here is we're in the middle of a general election, and the issues raised are jurisdictional issues at the heart of this. How does a state court and a state prosecutor use a federal law, a federal election law, not defined, to affect a federal presidential election? And you need to keep something in mind. The issue is we the people. It's our election. We're the voters. It's our election. We're the voters. So this is really an attack on us. Donald Trump for 6 weeks was unable to campaign. He was unable to speak to us directly because of this, not only being stuck in court, but this horrendous gag order that was intentional. Unable to do rallies on Mondays and Tuesdays and Thursdays and Fridays, and also mostly Wednesdays because he had to get back to court. Substantial redirection of resources to legal expenses away from campaign ads and other campaign activities. In other words, he is and has been unable to run a routine, normal presidential campaign. First time in American history. Why? Because of this lawfare. Because of this lawfare. So I mentioned that to you. I've talked about Bush versus Gore because I believe substantively that's important, the Equal Protection Clause. But the question is, it's difficult, it's doable. How do you get to the U.S. Supreme Court? And they're going to have to think about that because the way I would do it is I would obviously point out that this was what I will call the reverse federalism, where a state court assumed authority over federal issues, is impacting a federal election, a presidential election, the choice of the most powerful official in the United States, a choice of one of the three branches of the federal government. The question is whether you leave that to states and to their courts and to a DA. Now, the court's instructions allowed the jury to convict Donald Trump for concealing a non-crime. The court allowed the jury to convict on any one of three possible predicate crimes without unanimity. So the jury could have convicted the predicate crime of a Federal Campaign Act violation, that is the payment of monies to Stormy Daniels. This alleged crime was committed, if at all, prior to the entry of the allegedly false business records. Bragg stated in his April 4, 2023 press conference, announcing an indictment, a total of 34 false entries were made in New York business records to conceal the initial covert $130,000 payment. So while the New York criminal statute requires that the state must prove the intent to commit another crime or to aid or conceal the commission thereof, the alleged federal election crime was already committed. So the business, I'm not saying it was a crime, but under their theory. So the business record entry could not have been to commit a federal offense or to aid the commission of a crime. It could have only been to conceal that crime in and of itself, if you follow the logic. but the jury was told that the state need not prove that the other crime was in fact committed. So the jury was empowered to convict Trump of intending to conceal an act that was not a crime. Trump wanted to keep quiet something that he had every right to keep quiet. And the list of horribles goes on and on and on. Yes, the issue isn't whether there is reversible error here. Many of us think there is. I have no idea what these judges in the state lineup will do. But the question is even bigger. Because now we have a DA and an acting state judge who have impacted a federal election, a federal campaign, to the detriment of the voters. By placing a scarlet letter on President Trump, which was the intention all along. Do you leave that to the state court process to decide? Do you hope that you'll get a good appellate decision? Or do you try and take it out of that jurisdiction that shouldn't have it in the first place? And how do you do it? I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
You know, folks, China, Russia, Iran, they're all on the move. Right here in the U.S., you've got inflation, you have open borders, and, of course, an election year. Oh, and we just crossed over $34 trillion in debt with no signs of slowing down. It's time to wake up, folks. There's a lot at risk, possibly even your retirement account. The time to protect yourself is before a crisis, not after. Advantage Gold, the gold and silver company I recommend to help Americans. Well, they'll help you prepare now for times just like these. Call them at 800-900-8000 today. Get their free 2024 gold and silver kit. Plus, tell them I sent you, and they'll give you a special Mark Levin discount worth up to $1,300 if you qualify. Call Advantage Gold today. Here's the number, 800-900-8000. Plus, see if you qualify to get your special discount worth up to $1,300 today, 800-900-8000. Performance may vary. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. You should always consult your financial and tax professional. Anyway, I don't want to get into the legal weeds here about how you would get to the Supreme Court if you try to get to the Supreme Court, or the possibility of getting to the U.S. Supreme Court. The problem here is, I think, both a legal one and a political one. The vast majority of you aren't lawyers. Those of you who are lawyers, the vast majority of you aren't litigators. The vast majority of you who are litigators have never had a case in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, or even a filing to the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court is a way to get around the New York courts, if the New York courts allow you to get around them. And as you do research, what you find is, well, there is a way, but the court, makes it fairly difficult. So, I want to get into some of this a little bit, and I'll be right back. You know, folks, we've got an awful lot swirling around this country, both internally and externally. We've got wars going on in all parts of the world. We've got riots effectively going on in our colleges and universities. We have inflation through the roof. It's an election year to boot. All these problems are often huge tailwinds for gold, which is why gold is at all-time highs, looking like it's going to go higher. And when it comes to gold, I only trust my friends at Advantage Gold. They help Americans just like you protect your retirement accounts and help safeguard your wealth through diversification. So call them right now. 800-900-8000. Get their free 2024 gold and silver kit plus a special Mark Levin discount worth up to $1,300 if you qualify. Call Advantage Gold right now. 800-900-8000. See if you qualify to get your special Mark Levin discount worth up to $1,300 today. Performance may vary. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. You should always consult your financial and tax professional.
You're listening to Denali, the great one.
The great one.
And you can call in now, 877-381-3811.
So the Trump campaign donation site crashed. Do we know what the link is for that, Mr. Producer? We're going to find out. I'll announce it. It won't be crashed forever because so many people were trying to donate. There are things you can do. You need to do them. Do not allow these people. 24, 48 hours, we all need to take it in and understand what's at stake. We already knew what's at stake, but it's unfortunately progressing. But we can't be, paralyzed by grief or dispirited to a point where we surrender the country to these people. It's DonaldJTrump.com. DonaldJTrump.com. We understand it's back up. Yeah. All right. So I'm working on my own theories here, but I don't want to be so esoteric. So esoteric. The Bush versus Gore, I think the bottom line with that case is it shows that the Supreme Court will act immediately when the election of a president is under threat. That's what they did then, and this presents no less a threat. No less demanding intercession by the one body with the power to preserve our democracy. I hear some of the legal analysts saying, I still have heart in the system. The problem is the system is an ass, as they say, and it's slow. The timing of all this is intended to use the system against the system. We're told that Alvin Bragg will be speaking soon. If you want to hear what he has to say, then you need to tune to another channel. I don't need to hear his victory lap. I don't need to hear from a tyrant. And my gut tells me you don't want to hear it either. You can go to MSNBC and CNN. I'm sure they'll play it live. I will not. So I'm letting our affiliates down the line know. In case they want to take it, we will not. It's not news. It's propaganda. It's out of the mouth of a tyrant. That's what it is. So, let's get beyond this a little bit. I have to analyze all this stuff. It's hard to do it on the fly, but I think I've done okay here. Let me try it this way. Let me go through it this way. Let's take a look at this. Stick with me here. There are rules that the court has. There are federal statutes about processes, about a petition, about writs, common law writs, statutory writs. Writ of certiorari is basically a statutory writ, a writ based on statutory law. And then you have common law writs, which are really extraordinary writs, very rare. They have been granted in the past under certain circumstances. But when you're looking at this, you got to take a lot of things into consideration. Maybe the Supreme Court says, well, why would we go there? You can come directly to us, but hell, we don't want to get involved in this. You stick with the state court. Wouldn't the response be, but the state court usurped federal jurisdiction? And this isn't going away. And it affects a federal election. And it'll affect federal presidential elections from today to the end of the republic. What about that? Well, that's something to worry about, I would think. Particularly since they intervened in Bush versus Gore, when a presidential election is under threat. So, that is an issue. The question is, what mechanism do you use? Well, you can use a common law writ. You can try. Judge Janine and I texted back and forth. She said, well, you have to, without getting into the common law writ, she said, you got to, go through the state appellate process first before you go to the Supreme Court. Generally, that's true. But under very extraordinary circumstances, the court will take up a case. And so my question is, isn't that one of those circumstances right now? We're in the middle of a presidential election. The lawyers who are familiar with the appellate process in New York say it's going to take months, maybe years. Well, that doesn't resolve anything. And isn't it true if they get away with this that it is going to be tried again and again and again and again? But for us, isn't the bigger question is, why all this hate for Donald Trump? And don't we know the answer? They hate us. They want to lord over us. They want to rule us. Climate change, open borders, massive debt, inflation, massive tax increases that they have planned, brainwashing your kids in our public schools, the Hitler Youth on our college campuses. They have agendas. They have Marxist, Islamist agendas. And the rule of law, that is, justice, gets into the way. So you must devour the justice system and remake it so that it can be used to serve your ends and your purposes. Isn't that what's taking place here? Of course it's what's taking place here. I heard one lawyer say, I don't blame the jurors. They got bad instructions from the judge. There's no question about that. The judge basically said, you have to rule that he's guilty. You have a multiple choice of crimes. Beyond a reasonable doubt doesn't have to actually be beyond a reasonable doubt. Even though I'm telling you to ignore, information about Trump that has nothing to do with the case, I'm going to let it in. Wink, wink, through the back door. Stormy Daniels had no reason to testify. None. And then, of course, the judge picked sides, and it was pretty obvious from day one to everybody. The media were giddy. They're celebrating tonight. So our republic has a problem. We don't have an honest media, a media that seeks to be impartial. We don't have that anymore. Yeah. It's a huge problem. But we can't just sit back and lament and wring our hands. We've got to do whatever we have to do, whether that means donations, whether that means spending some time now, every week or on the weekends, getting our people registered to vote. In states that have early voting, it's not good enough for you just to vote. You've got to make sure people vote early. You've got to work on it. You've got to take your dispirit and be inspirited, if you will. And say, you know what? I haven't been doing enough. I can no longer leave it to the system because the system isn't working. It's being devoured. The other side is energetic. Don't believe this crap. I tell you all the time, polls. Listen to me. All that creates is lethargy. I don't care what the polls say. There's a lot of things going on under the radar that are not picked up by the polls. There's a lot of things going on in the shadows, whether it's using federal employees to register people and our dollars, or God knows what. We have to turn out in large numbers. And if we don't turn out in large numbers, they're going to win. It's that simple. That's on us. We need to take control in our own lives and in our own roles. Let this be a lesson to all of us. The rule of law in most parts of the world is not a just law. And it wasn't just here. Even if this is reversed somehow, some way, severe damage has been done. The judicial process is very slow. That's why they timed it the way they did. That's why they didn't give a damn about appeals. And when you see Bragg and the others celebrating, smiling, saying justice was done, Donald Trump's not above the law, you can't cheat the people of New York. You can't cheat the voters in 2016. Turn your anger into activism. I'm not kidding. It's now or never. It's now or never. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
All over the world, our enemies are on the move. And in our own country, same thing. Things are tough between rising prices, election issues, a $34 trillion debt. But folks, there is good news. If you're smart, you can use these problems to your advantage. By making the right choices right now, you can keep your retirement money safe and even make more money in this climate. That's where Advantage Gold comes in. They're experts in helping Americans protect their savings with gold and silver. It's called diversification. Call Advantage Gold today, 800-900-8000. They'll send you a free 2024 gold and silver kit that tells you how to keep your money safe when things are bad. Tell them I sent you, and you may qualify for a special Mark Levin discount worth up to $1,300. Call Advantage Gold at 800-900-8000, 800-900-8000. See if you qualify for that special discount worth up to $1,300. That's 800-900-8000. Performance may vary. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. You should always consult your financial and tax professionals. Now, the issue also in Bush versus Gore, that shows that the Supreme Court will treat a presidential election differently. That is, it could well act immediately, which it pretty much did in Bush versus Gore, when the election of a president is being challenged or is potentially under threat. And they didn't really use a particular doctrine that was in existence. They created one. And that is the application of what was taking place to the Equal Protection Clause. Obviously, they didn't create the 14th Amendment. I'm saying the application of the 14th Amendment. And what they said there was, look, you keep changing your voting rules so that voters have been treated differently in different parts of the state. So that violates the equal protection of the voters who are in and the voters who are out, because it's very difficult, if not impossible, to determine what the standards are, certainly after the fact. Certainly after the fact. This case is worse than Bush versus Gore. The assumption of federal jurisdiction, the failure to define the federal statute or statutes that are involved. In fact, a reference to a federal offense only in the closing statement of the prosecution, and it goes on and on and on. That is the multitudinous due process violations. But what does that have to do with equal protection of the voter? Everything. The purpose of this litigation is to affect the election, was to interfere with the election, was to prevent Donald Trump from campaigning. That's why it was brought 7 years later. To prevent you, Mr. and Mrs. America, from hearing what he has to say, other than when he was speaking from the courthouse steps or maybe on a weekend. But that's not a normal, routine campaign. That's not a regular campaign. Obviously, he was handicapped. Regardless of people saying it won't affect the outcome, it doesn't help him. Let's put it that way. And he says it over and over again. I'm stuck here. I want to campaign. I'm stuck here. I want to campaign. And that was the goal all along. To prevent you from participating in a normal, regular campaign. But really, it's focused on a small percentage of the voting bloc that maybe hasn't made up its mind. And maybe those individuals in those key battleground states. Everybody says it's going to be decided by 40, 50, 60,000 votes. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but you ought to believe it will be and fight hard. So it doesn't take much to move the needle. But clearly, the Democrats feel that it will move the needle. That's why this was undertaken. The way it was undertaken, when it was undertaken. I have a basic question. Why didn't the Federal Election Commission rule that Donald Trump's NDA was a violation of the Federal Campaign Election Act? They said no. They have federal jurisdiction. Why didn't the U.S. Attorney's Office say, man, we have a case here, let's bring it? It's not like they're bashful about bringing cases or taking risks on cases. They said no. Why? And yet without that federal connection, there's nothing. They said no. It's because this is corrupt. They hid the ball. They saved it to the end. They didn't have the expert on to say what he needed to say. Would have changed the whole thing. The state law would not have been revived. And so, to manipulate federal law, to manipulate federal jurisdiction, seems to me there needs to be a way for the feds to get involved. I'll be right back. This segment of the podcast is exclusively sponsored by Pure Talk. Pure Talk offers great coverage and can save your family money on your wireless bill every single month. Go to puretalk.com to find the plan that's right for you. Thank you again for listening, and thank you so much for this sponsorship, Pure Talk.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, America. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. Got a lot of people emailing me, texting me. I get it. I understand. You want some kind of positive, some kind of a positive something to hold on to. And the positive something to hold on to is, it's up to us. I know half the country's nuts. But if we turn out more of us than they do of them. That is, more people who believe in liberty than in tyranny. That'll make a difference. That's the truth. And let's see here. If I were making a substantive argument, I would make it on the basic violation of due process rights to the Supreme Court, that it should assume jurisdiction, should also consider other issues that relate directly to exposing what the prosecutor and trial judge have done, but even more than that, the effect it has on the voters and on the electoral process. But I do worry the court will say, geez, we don't want to get involved in this. We have a non-violent, non-shooting civil war going on in this country. I mean, they're even trying to take out Alito right now. They took a run at Clarence. Before that, they took a run at Neal. Before that, again, they took a run at Clarence. Geez. There is that. There's definitely that. We didn't listen to Bragg, but I'm told basically he wrapped himself in the jury spoke and justice was done and everybody has to be held to account. That his office even quotes Thomas Dewey, for God's sake, so it's all quite political and purposely so. So you do have that, which is nothing. But he wasn't up there very long either, I might add. He wasn't up there very long. So there are legal issues that need to be explored. He's got very good lawyers. Despite what took place, it was not due to them. It was due to a corrupt system. And he'll have the best appellate lawyers, I'm sure, providing advice and taking a look at these various possibilities. They also have to take something into consideration, which is what is politically propitiant. Because after all, at the end of the day, the goal is to win the presidency. Now, what kicks in here, should I even bring this up now? I guess I will, Mr. Producer. What kicks in here is this. And it's not something I think Donald Trump should really get involved in, but I'll speak about it. Can a president pardon himself in relation to a state holding? Now, you know my position on this, and it's absolutely. And why is that? You see, what's interesting to me is you have lawyers talking about filing an appeal. Okay, he wins the presidency. In the case, the appeals are still going on. The Supreme Court says no. The state courts will not grant expedited emergency review. He gets elected president, and there they are hanging out there. According to the United States Department of Justice, when it comes to a federal matter, you cannot indict a sitting president. Okay, you'll say, well, he wasn't indicted when he was a sitting president. But their rationale is, you can't decapitate a third of the government. He is the executive branch. Well, he's spending time on this. But I would argue further. You cannot have the top federal official in the land subjected to determinations made by state officials. By state officials. And so this raises a lot of complications, what happened here. And so what I'm saying is, at least thinking this through with you out loud, I feel an effort should be made to give the Supreme Court an opportunity to address this. They may not accept it, but to have an opportunity to try and nip this in the bud, as they say. Because it does raise those questions. Look, everybody who's a serious person who loves this country, who's worried about the judicial system, the justice system, the legal system, is very concerned tonight. Very concerned. While they're partying at the White House and the DNC, and they're partying in Democrat strongholds all over the country. And that's the problem, isn't it? That's the problem. If you believe the Constitution is invalid because of those who drafted it, adopted it, and ratified it, if you believe America's founding is invalid, or worse, we're colonialist and imperialist, if you believe the rule of law doesn't apply to you because of those who made it, and you read American Marxism, it's loaded with examples of this, then this is a good thing, what happened today. If you believe, as they say on MSNBC and CNN, that Donald Trump will destroy democracy, and this is what Biden says, if you believe he's the equivalent of Hitler and Stalin and Mussolini wrapped in one, if you believe he'll put people in prison willy-nilly, he'll even kill them, somebody said, then this is a grand old day. This is fantastic. They begin to believe their own lies because it's about power. They're power hungry. And the abuse of power. You know, you can use power in positive ways. The Constitution is a document of power, but limited powers, shared powers, balance of powers, federalism, bicameral Congress. With amendments, a president who can only serve a certain number of years, and so forth and so on. The impeachment clause, just in case clause. The just in case clause. So power can be exercised in a positive way, you know, to protect you from a mob, to protect you from factions, to protect you from whatever it is. Protect your property, your earnings, your family, your physical being. But that same power can also be abused, as it was today and has been for the last 6 weeks. That's a big problem. That's abuse of power. When liberty is used to destroy liberty, when power is used to destroy liberty. That's why the Constitution is such a magnificent document. Those men were debating how to use power to effect how people live in a positive way. How to provide for individual liberty, but on the other hand, to protect the civil society. Boy, did they do a hell of a job. The Democrat Party does not embrace this. They're attacking Supreme Court justices. They're attacking the Electoral College. They're attacking the American citizenry with an open border. They're attacking our very economic system that has created all this prosperity that has improved our lives like no human beings ever before in history, and no human beings anywhere else in the world. They talk about fundamental transformation all the time. Well, obviously, in order to fundamentally transform America, you have to fundamentally transform our justice system, that is our legal system, and you have to fundamentally transform what people can say and how they can think, and that's well underway as well. and evil becomes good, like the Hitler Youth on our college campuses, and good becomes evil. So they attack Netanyahu and the Israeli people who just want to live in peace. Donald Trump fundamentally challenges this. Even the Republican establishment is very uncomfortable with him. The Paul Ryans of the world and others. But for the Democrats, he's kryptonite. Because if he succeeds, they fail, and they fail miserably. Miserably. We now have an election system that is subject to what a local district attorney and an acting state judge might decide to do. They usurped federal jurisdiction. They're interfering with a presidential election as I speak. If the Supreme Court of the United States is to act, it would act now. And I don't mean this minute. I mean, if it doesn't act here, what's the point? And so we have to find ways, avenues, in my view, to get it to the court. And if they don't take it, so be it. Or if they rule the wrong way, fine, it's over. But you cannot leave it to the state and hope for the best. That's not to say an appellate court won't do the right thing, but it may not do the right thing in the right amount of time. Or maybe it'll do half the right thing. I don't know. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
We're so fortunate in this country to have a military of men and women who voluntarily lay their lives on the line for us. But when their service ends, transition to civilian life can be very difficult, especially now. Access to housing, employment, even their earned VA benefits can be very difficult. That's why Pure Talk proudly helps support America's Warrior Partnership and their mission to prevent veteran suicide. This is very important. You can join the fight when you switch to Pure Talk's 5G service and help Pure Talk support this great charity. Remember, Pure Talk was founded by a veteran. Through the end of the month, they'll match every dollar donated up to $50,000. Folks, choose a wireless company that shares your values. Upgrade your cell phone service to America's most dependable 5G network. Just $20 a month. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. puretalk.com/Levin. Make the switch, folks. That's puretalk.com/Levin. Levin. For superior cell phone service, that's half the price of Verizon, AT&T, or T-Mobile. And to help Pure Talk help our vets. All right. We're not going to be a Pollyanna here. It's not a good day. It's a horrendous day for the country, for us, we the people. Look, we're the target of this. The reason people run for office, the reason people want power, the reason people are in the media is because they want to direct how we're to live. Some people want us to be more free in the spirit of our founding, and some people want us to be part of a collective, and not just an economic collective. To think similar thoughts, to speak similar ways, to get in line and be happy about it. The question is, what's the line here between a soft tyranny, as Alexis de Tocqueville called it, and a hard tyranny? Where are we on that spectrum? Well, I don't know with exactitude, but I do know this. We're further down that tyranny spectrum today than we were yesterday. And we're further down that tyranny spectrum 6 weeks ago when this whole thing really kicked into gear. And so I want to know now, what exactly is there to prevent a local district attorney from bringing charges, taking a look at what took place in the courtroom, and playing the same fan dance. No crime, no criminal pretext, no elements, no rules of evidence except what the judge decides and the prosecutor wants. What's to stop this? Even if you go up the appellate chain in New York, and even if they reverse on every single issue, what's to stop another DA in another state from doing exactly the same thing? There's only one United States Supreme Court. There's only one president. We have a presidential election, a federal election. We have federal election laws. The states decide the manner of voting, but the federal government decides everything else. Everything else. So the issue here is not just the due process rights of Donald Trump, but the due process rights of Donald Trump, which are crucially important, quite frankly, but to the broader issue of the consequences for the body politic. If you have a star chamber in a Democrat city, in a Democrat state, that impacts a federal presidential election, that claims authority and jurisdiction over federal campaign law, which it refuses to define because it can't, then what? Unless at some point the Supreme Court steps in, and it won't be easy. You got the three leftists. You got Roberts, who probably feels, oh, we're already under attack by the Democrats. He worries about the press, and he worries about that. He shouldn't. Then this is going to get worse and worse and worse. So today we do not know. As a result of the Jack Smith case, what the rules are for elections, what's legal, what's illegal, and we do not know. We do not know whether a DA has the power, actually we do know, to completely gut a presidential candidate. Our election system is now a complete mess. I'll be right back. We're so fortunate in this country to have a military of men and women who voluntarily lay their lives on the line for us. But when their service ends, transition to civilian life can be very difficult, especially now. Access to housing, employment, even their earned VA benefits can be very difficult. That's why Pure Talk proudly helps support America's Warrior Partnership and their mission to prevent veteran suicide. This is very important. You can join the fight when you switch to Pure Talk's 5G service and help Pure Talk support this great charity. Remember, Pure Talk was founded by a veteran. Through the end of the month, they'll match every dollar donated up to $50,000. Folks, choose a wireless company that shares your values. Upgrade your cell phone service to America's most dependable 5G network. Just $20 a month. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. puretalk.com/LEVIN. Make the switch, folks. That's puretalk.com/LEVIN. Levin. For superior cell phone service that's half the price of Verizon, AT&T, or T-Mobile. And to help Pure Talk help our vets.
Mark Levin, a proud conservative. No ifs, ands, or buts. Call in at 877-381-3811.
So in New York, I guess the way I would approach it is you would file the notice of appeal, ask for a stay of the trial court, seek expedited review, And then you might file your applications for what we call common law writs with the U.S. Supreme Court, where the U.S. Supreme Court can take action if it chooses, not based on any statute necessarily. And you would make the claim that the harm is immediate and ongoing. You're in the middle of a general election. And you could make the case that way, among other things. And trying to think this through, America. They have the power to act if they want to. But they're going to need at least 4 justices who are willing to take it up. Do you think they can do that, Mr. Producer? That's the problem. We don't know, do we? That's also part of why there's this campaign, one justice at a time, to attack one justice at a time. Now, the election is 6 months away. The interference with the federal electoral system is patent. The denial due process under the Constitution has infected every aspect of the lower court's process. There are serious jurisdictional issues here. But even more than that, what's the alternative for the court? To let states do this? To let district attorneys do this? What's the alternative? And so, that would be my advice. We have any callers? I should use this as an opportunity to answer any questions or to hear people out, because I know people want to vent, Mr. Producer. WMAL, Joe, Woodbridge, Virginia. Go right ahead, sir.
First time caller, Mark. It's an honor.
Thank you, my brother.
So, couple questions. A little confusing. Just some of the things that took place is just mind-boggling. They keep saying that Donald Trump's above the law, but, from the average person listening, it seems like Donald Trump's below the law. And one of the questions I had was, and correct me if I'm wrong, the bookkeeping errors were originally misdemeanors, and in order to bump it up to a felony, it had to be proven that Trump was covering up another crime, such as campaign finance. And what I don't understand, Mark, is if that's true, if that's the case, then how could the judge deny the defense the opportunity to put a key witness expert on campaign finance law?
Well, legally he can't. But this is the problem when you have a rogue judge who doesn't give a damn. He wanted to convict Trump. And so he was not just the judge, he was the jury. He was the prosecution. He was all those things. He was the judge, jury, and prosecutor in this case. He was the maestro. He could have said to the prosecutor, "No, you don't have jurisdiction. You don't even have claims in here that are understandable." But he didn't. He could have allowed key witnesses to testify without interruption, but he didn't. He could have allowed a key witness to testify, period, on the election law, but he wouldn't. He could have given instructions that were actually constitutional. We need a unanimous jury on one criminal count, but he didn't. How do you get away with it? Well, you live in a blue state where the legal system is corrupt, where the target is Donald Trump, where you have to prevent, quote-unquote, Hitler from getting into the White House under all circumstances, and then you pat yourself on the back. Job well done. That's what happens.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the secondary charges of besides campaign finance, they were using as a way to bump it up to a felony that he was covering up another crime, such as hiding hush money payments. But since when has what's the legal term for hush money? It's called non-disclosure agreements.
Apparently now it is. It's a non-disclosure agreement, but the media obviously filled with propagandists, and their goal is not to actually report information. Their goal is to indoctrinate and to brainwash. Most of these media organizations have signed non-disclosure agreements with various employees and so forth. Did they call it hush money then? Of course not.
Yep.
They didn't call it hush money then. When members of Congress, remember that scandal where sexual harassment claims had non-disclosure agreements and we, the taxpayer, funded them? They didn't call those hush money agreements. Human resources departments all over this country, when people are removed for cause or not, you tend to get a severance package, and part of that severance package is you sign a confidentiality agreement. Is that hush money? But when it comes to Donald Trump, it's hush money. How many companies in this country, small businesses and large, of all kinds, all stripes, when they have signed severance agreements that include non-disclosure agreements, how many of them put them down as a business expense or a legal expense? And if you do it one way or the other, how is it criminal when your books are open to the whole world, when auditors can see it? And now we have a situation where any district attorney will be able to assert that any effort to squelch negative information is potentially illegal. Maybe it's an illegal in-kind contribution. And they can monetize it. Why not? So now we don't know, between Jack Smith and what he's done, criminalizing these various challenges to the election, and Alvin Bragg, who has criminalized legal behavior, not only legal behavior, but has done so without jurisdiction, and even the violation doesn't make any sense, since the reporting of the non-disclosure agreement wouldn't have happened until after Election Day. So what are the rules now? What are the rules for running an election? For donations? For challenging elections? We don't know. Because Jack Smith, Alvin Bragg, more to come, that is the Democrats, the Biden regime, they've unleashed all of this for the purpose of defeating and destroying Donald Trump and electing Joe Biden. Our election system is a shambles. Our legal system is a shambles. Our Constitution is under attack. That's the state of play. Not to drive you all to the roof. I don't want you to jump off, but to tell you, you know this is serious. We're adults. And so it's very, very important that we get off our asses and do something different, do something more in a political, legal, legitimate way to affect the election and get out the vote. Thank you for your call, my friend. Excellent questions. Who's next, Mr. Producer? WABC, Esther, Brooklyn, New York. Go right ahead, please.
All right. First of all, I'm sitting shiva over this verdict. I had a sickening feeling it was going to happen, too. Judge Janine Pirro was talking about appealing to the U.S. Supreme Court. I think this is what she's talking about, is when the lawyers go in, and I don't know what the setup is everywhere else, but I know in New York State, there's always like a bunch of, there's like a line of tables in front of the bench. Lawyers walk up, they take their fists, they bang it down on the table, and they say, "We have lost faith in this process." And then they walk out, and then they appeal to federal court. I don't know if that's what she's talking about.
Well, I have no idea what she said, so I'd rather not comment on it. So I don't know. I know she's a hell of a lawyer, and she's been a prosecutor and a judge. She's a very smart lady.
And then
so I don't know.
All right.
But my view is you need to find a way, a path to give the Supreme Court the opportunity to help fix this. If they turn it down, you can't control that.
Yeah.
But they can't just step in without a petitioner. and say, you know what, this is a mess. The precedent that this is setting is horrendous.
No, that I agree. I agree. I mean,
there's only one place you can go to try and address this. All right, my friend, thanks for your call. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
We're so fortunate in this country to have a military of men and women who voluntarily lay their lives on the line for us. But when their service ends, transition to civilian life can be very difficult, especially now. Access to housing, employment, even their earned VA benefits can be very difficult. That's why Pure Talk proudly helps support America's Warrior Partnership and their mission to prevent veteran suicide. This is very important. You can join the fight when you switch to Pure Talk's 5G service and help Pure Talk support this great charity. Remember, Pure Talk was founded by a veteran. Through the end of the month, they'll match every dollar donated up to $50,000. Folks, choose a wireless company that shares your values. Upgrade your cell phone service to America's most dependable 5G network. Just $20 a month. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. puretalk.com/Levin. Make the switch, folks. That's puretalk.com/Levin. Levin. For superior cell phone service, that's half the price of Verizon, AT&T, or T-Mobile. And to help Pure Talk help our vets. All right, ladies and gentlemen. All kinds of people calling me, you wouldn't believe it. Anyway, let me explain my thinking again. The issue is how to get out of the New York system and bring the case to the Supreme Court, which may or may not take it up. But without a petitioner, the court won't take it up. See what I'm saying, Mr. Producer? So how do you do this? This is why I looked to Bush versus Gore, where the Supreme Court decided to step in because it was a presidential election. There was another court involved, the Florida Supreme Court. And it was the court that the Supreme Court believed was violating the Equal Protection Clause. That was the doctrine it settled on, given the unequal treatment of the voters. In New York, you would file the notice of appeal, ask for a stay of the trial court, and seek expedited review. But you might then also file applications for common law writs with the U.S. Supreme Court. That is, a writ where you're seeking the Supreme Court's involvement. It doesn't even have to be attached to a specific statute. Where the Supreme Court can take action if it chooses and legitimately claim the harm is immediate and ongoing, not just to a presidential candidate, but to the federal electoral system, federal campaign jurisdiction. The interference is patent. The denial of due process infected every aspect of the case. And as of right now, we do not have any boundaries on federal election laws. So the Supreme Court has common law powers it uses very sparingly in extraordinary circumstances to grant relief. Waiting would compound the problem. The problem now is that every day that goes by, the actions by the New York lower court bleeds into the election system, into the federal presidential election system. Where does this end? I'm writing it as I speak, so I have it for myself. Where did this end? Well, other DAs use the Bragg and Mershon precedent, such as it is, going forward, and not give a damn, and not care what higher courts have to say, higher state courts have to say. You see what I'm saying, Mr. Producer? in that those courts may not act quickly or at all. So now we leave it to the states. So now local prosecutors and state judges will intervene in elections? What do I owe you, Mr. Producer? You're with me, folks. This is live radio as I go along here and thinking these things through. I'll continue my thought processes live and interactive. We'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, America. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. Let me try this. The issue is how to get out of the New York system and bring the case to the Supreme Court, which may or may not take it up. That is why I looked to Bush versus Gore, where the Supreme Court decided to step in because it was a presidential election. There was another court involved, the Florida Supreme Court, and it was that court that the Supreme Court believed was violating the Equal Protection Clause. That was the doctrine it settled on, given the unequal treatment of voters. In New York, you would file the notice of appeal, ask for a stay of the trial court, and seek expedited review. Because you need to protect your state appellate process. So you wouldn't just abandon it, but you need to protect it. So you need to protect your state appellate process. I'm writing it as I speak. You need to protect your ability to timely appeal and not abandon it. You might then file applications for common law writs with the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court could take action if it chooses, and legitimately claim the harm is immediate and ongoing, not just to a presidential candidate, but to the federal electoral system, federal campaign jurisdiction, and the precedent that the action by the DA and the local judge and the precedent that might otherwise be set and spread throughout the country. Now, the denial of due process infected every aspect of the case. That's a Fifth Amendment right for President Trump. And that's the hook. The Supreme Court has common law powers it uses very sparingly in extraordinary circumstances to grant relief. Waiting would compound the problem. The problem now is that every day that goes by, the actions by the New York lower court bleeds into the federal presidential election system. Where does this end? While other DAs use the Bragg-Merchan precedent, such as it is, going forward, and not care what higher state courts have to say, in that those courts and those courts may not act quickly or at all. So now local prosecutors and state judges will intervene in presidential elections or any federal election? We need to give the Supreme Court the opportunity to intervene. If it chooses not to, then it won't work. That's up to them. But between Jack Smith criminalizing election challenges to the point that we do not know what is or is not legal, and now Bragg and Mershon criminalizing events and activities that are not illegal to the point we don't even know what they are, the Supreme Court, in my view, must do something. Supreme Court, in my view, must do something. Or federal elections will cease to be federal elections. Does this make sense to you, Mr. Producer? I mean, I know you don't know the law, but the logic of it. And I can get more in the weeds, but I think that would turn people off. All right. Who's our next caller, Mr. Producer? XM Satellite. Aaron in Texas. Go right ahead, please.
Hi, Mark. I've been listening since my son was a toddler, and he is now 20.
Wow, thank you.
So I'm a long-time listener. Thank you. You're my hero. So my question is, I pray that it doesn't come to jail time for President Trump. But if it does, what could he be facing, and could he be pardoned?
Well, could he be pardoned? That's a very, very important question, because a lot of people say that a president, being the president of the federal, being the leader of the federal government, cannot pardon anyone on a state law conviction, let alone himself. I say when it comes to a president himself or herself, the Constitution, of course, is silent on this issue of whether he or she can pardon themselves. But the Department of Justice, over more than half a century, has said you can't indict a sitting president. Now, why did they say that? It's not in the Constitution because you would decapitate the executive branch. He is the executive branch. And so you cannot allow a prosecutor, a grand jury, a relative handful of people to determine the fate of a president and the decision of electors. I say that applies to this too, by the way. Now, all that aside, the argument would apply, it seems to me, to state indictments. Now, the argument might be, well, he wasn't president at the time he was indicted. But no, the problem is if it stays the way it is, and if the appellate courts don't act in time, the state appellate courts, it will bleed into his presidency. And then what? You'll have a president go to the same courtroom where an acting state-appointed judge will decide if a sitting president goes to prison? Oh, my God, would that destroy our republic or not? Of course it would. So it seems to me the rational, reasonable, logical position is Donald Trump could pardon himself, depending if this bleeds into his presidency. For the same reasons you can't indict a sitting president, the same arguments. Can Joe Biden pardon him if he's president again? Number one, he wouldn't. Number two, he certainly wouldn't interpret that pardon issue the way I have. He just assumed Donald Trump rot in prison. I hope that answers your question. It's the best I can do.
It does. And if President Trump is listening, we all love you so much. And it felt like a knife to my heart when I heard the news today.
I know.
Thank you, Mark.
All right. God bless you, my friend. Next caller, Mr. Producer, to whom shall I speak? WABC, Chester in New Jersey. Go right ahead, please.
Mark, it's a great one. It's an honor to speak to you.
No, you're very nice.
I got a couple of questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
It always annoys me the fact that they call a hush money instead of non-disclosure act. And you stole some of my questions before when you were talking about the congressional hush, non-disclosure things and how they use.
I actually hadn't remembered that. About a month ago, my wife reminded me of that. But go ahead.
Yeah, that annoys me too. Plus, it's like when they talk about AR-15s being assault weapons is stupid too. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, I never miss your show on the weekends, and I was wondering what you think about Morgan Ortegas for the vice president. She seems like a very intelligent woman.
Well, I've met her. I can't say I know her that well, so I'm really not in a position to say. It's certainly not front of mind right now, I can tell you that. All right, my friend, and I appreciate you watching the show. This weekend it'll be a killer. It's going to be all about all of this the whole time, with some great guests, and of course, I will have time to think this through even further. And by the way, I'll be on Hannity tonight at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
We're here with our friend Brent Bozell for a big reason at the Media Research Center. Brent, you guys have been tracking the media coverage of all this nonsense, and you found out a lot of things. In part, what did you find out?
Well, look at the numbers and then look inside the numbers. If you look at the network newscast coverage since the beginning of trial of the jury selection, there have been a total of 640 minutes that have been devoted to this. Now, that's a huge amount, and you can say, well, look, it's a trial where the former president is on trial. So, and I'll agree with you. It's an important issue. But I would also remind you that there have been other important trials, such as the impeachment of Bill Clinton, such as Benghazi with Hillary, such as an alphabet soup having to do with Joe Biden, and there's been no coverage of that. But let's put that aside. Look at the 640 minutes. 244 of those 644 minutes have been devoted to attacking Donald Trump. So 1/3 of the coverage that was done on this was not in any way pretending to be even-handed. It was an attack. Now let's look deeper into the numbers, and this is where it really is going to get very bothersome. If you look at some key elements of this saga, these are things you've covered night after night after night. Now let's look at how the networks are telling their viewers. Let's start with the DA, Bragg, Alvin Bragg. Who is Alvin Bragg? Well, you know that he's a Democrat. You know that and you've told your audience many times, how he ran on a campaign to take out Donald Trump. Just imagine for a second, Mark. Let's put a scenario where Barack Obama is accused of something similar. Barack Obama is put on trial in Jackson, Mississippi. The DA going after him is a white Republican who said he was out to get Barack Obama. And you don't even know the underlying crime that Barack Obama committed to begin with until closing arguments. The media would be all over this trial. Mm-hmm. So, to the question, how much coverage did they give Alvin Bragg? How much coverage did they talk about him? NBC News, out of 110 total evening news stories, on NBC News, there were 2 references to Alvin Bragg. No stories done. On ABC, the only time you heard about Alvin Bragg being a Democrat was one soundbite by Donald Trump. On CBS News, there wasn't a single reference to the political agenda of Alvin Bragg in the entirety of the coverage. Not once. Now, Mark, here's the point. And I'll give you a couple more examples if you want. Here's the point. This was done on purpose. This is not the bias by ignorance. This is not something that they didn't know. They are fully aware of what I just said. This was a deliberate attempt to go in for the kill for the Biden campaign. They're doing the Biden bidding. They saw the opportunity to put Biden ahead. By the way, I don't think it's going to work. And they jumped on it. I think it's got to be the most dishonest media performance I've ever seen, and by God, I've seen a lot.
And what about the consequences going? The future here. The media are all for this. They're giddy. They're promoting it. But look at the election system now. The election system is in disarray. You have Jack Smith, who is criminalizing election challenges that in the past have been perfectly constitutional and legal. Now you have Bragg, who's criminalizing events, and we don't even know what the crimes are, reaching into federal jurisdiction, and we don't know exactly what he's reaching into. It's so amorphous. I mean, if the Supreme Court doesn't step in, it's not going to get cleaned up. You're going to have DAs all over the country doing this sort of thing, aren't you?
Yes, and what concerns me is that fully one-third of the American people have absolutely no idea what you're saying. If you look at the polls, Donald Trump is ahead 46 to 44. If you look at people at the 32% of the American people who still say they get their news from those three networks, Biden is leading 55 to 35%. Now, why wouldn't he be leading? When you have got this cone of silence over anything that might be controversial. Let me give you another example. Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen was the centerpiece of Donald Trump's defense. Michael Cohen is a serial perjurer. Michael Cohen has been convicted of this. He's about the most disgusting public person I have ever heard of. Okay, so 1/3 of the total coverage of this trial was devoted to Michael Cohen. How much time would you guess out of 640 minutes was devoted to discussing the fact that he'd been convicted of perjury? Again, the centerpiece of Donald Trump's defense. The answer, 3 minutes out of 640 minutes. Again, Mark, deliberate that they are not going to tell their viewers who Michael Cohen is, and they're not going to give an opportunity for Donald Trump to defend himself in front of those 32 people. So 32%. So now you understand why Biden enjoys a 55 to 35% lead over Donald Trump with that demographic. It is feeding directly into them. And this is a decision on a presidential campaign that could be decided by a couple of points. That's how important this is. And yeah, I'm thinking to myself, Mark, these airwaves belong to the American people. The Supreme Court has said that. And they are being abused by networks that are deliberately interfering with the entire democratic process in the United States. There's got to be something done. I think it's high time there were congressional hearings on this.
That would be very, very nice, wouldn't it? But I also think...
Oh, you want another one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Another example?
Yeah, of course.
The judge, Juan Merchan. Now, you've heard the Donald Trump talk about how his daughter is one of the top contributors or fundraisers for the Democratic Party. Well, nobody who watches the networks heard that. But even more, how many people know that Judge Juan Merchan is a donor to the Joe Biden campaign, donated in 2020 to Joe Biden for president? How many people know that the judge was a funder of a group called Stop Republicans? The answer is, if you look at the network newscasts, are you ready? Not one ever mentioned that. Not one. In 640...
Don't leave us. I want to continue to pursue this with you. It's so important because the media spin is in full swing right now. We're with Brent Bozell, head muckety-muck of the Media Research Center. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin, the thunder on the right. Call in now, 877-381-3811.
Welcome back, America. We're here with our buddy Brent Bozell, founder, CEO, president, Baby Doc, the Media Research Center. Brent Bozell, I'm going to ask you what I'm being asked. So going forward here, You think this will have an impact on the election? I mean, we know the media will use this as an opportunity to constantly ding and bang and hammer Trump on behalf of Biden. Do you think that'll have an impact? It can't help, right?
I think it will. I think it will. I think it's going to help Trump, and here's why. If the MAGA nation will be more solid behind him than it's ever been before. That's point number one. You will have no defections. Number two, you've had some people who have defected from the Biden camp because of economic issues. That's the one thing they care about. They care about inflation. They care about mortgage rates. They care about the price of gasoline. They don't give a damn about this. And they're not going to change their votes back to Biden when their issue is pocketbook issues, not to mention the border, not to mention Israel, and so many other things that the Biden administration has messed up. And then thirdly, I think there's going to be a segment of the soft Biden vote that's going to look at this, and it's going to believe that there's something fundamentally unfair and fundamentally wrong. And then they're going to see Donald Trump on the campaign trail, Donald Trump in rallies where he's going to have 100,000 people behind him cheering him on. And people are going to start second-guessing this. It's just my hunch. I don't think this is going to hurt him. I think this is going to help him.
Mm-hmm. Well, apparently his donation site was overwhelmed and shut down, right, Mr. Producer? What is his donation site again? DonaldJTrump.com, DonaldJTrump.com, folks. Joe Biden is now fundraising off of the Trump verdict, Brent Bozell. I mean, his hand has been involved in his campaign the entire time, hasn't it?
Is there any separation? Is there any distinction between the news media and Joe Biden? If Joe Biden were running NBC, CBS, and ABC, if he was in charge of the decision-making, would it be any different than it is right now? This is frightening. You know, we saw a biased media against Ronald Reagan. We saw a biased media against both Bushes. You've seen a biased media against Republican presidential candidates and presidents for as long as we can remember. You've never seen a media like this, a media that not just are biased, but they're lying through their teeth, and more importantly, they're keeping information from the American people, information that might harm their token candidate, which is Joe Biden. Watch what happens next week. Just you watch with the Hunter Biden trial. Just watch how much coverage it's going to get. It's going to get next to nothing. Oh, Fox is going to report it, and people who watch Fox are going to believe, well, you know, it's being covered. Not true. Not true. When you watch the big three networks, you're going to see, again, another cone of silence.
And you have a piece up at MRC, negative, nasty, lurid, and obsessive coverage of Trump's trial, newsbusters.org. You've been tracking this. How do we even describe this media anymore? I'm kind of out of words, aren't you?
Well, you know, I do believe they share in the neo-Marxist worldview of the far left, and the reason I say that is because they give aid and comfort, and they advance it. Look at how they advanced the Black Lives Matter movement, which was a self-described Marxist movement. Look how they've advanced Antifa. That's a terrorist organization. Look how they've advanced the pro-Hamas movement, which they love to call Palestinian. It's pro-Hamas. The Hamas people could not be any happier with the networks than they are today. And by the way, they've been doing this for years with Israel. For years they've been doing this. So are they the tip of the spear for neo-Marxism in America today? Absolutely. Would they make Walter Cronkite shudder in this belief? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Well, we can't actually do anything about them other than compete against them, keep building platforms against them, exposing them. and hoping the American people understand what's taking place. But isn't this also a problem? That is the indoctrination in our academic, in our schools and so forth, and our academic teachings, and moreover, a wide open border, people coming in who have no idea whatsoever about American history and the Constitution, and are going to get the opposite of it in our public school system.
And what they're being taught is that American exceptionalism is wrong. They're being taught critical race theory, that America is fundamentally a racist country. They're being taught that the alternative is the 1619 Project, which came out of the New York Times, which suggests that you don't need 1776, you don't need the Constitution, you don't need the Republic. You can come up with a new country. That's what immigrants are being hit with. That's what America's children are being hit with. Again, this is a news media that could care less about the news. This is indoctrination at every single level. You know, think about a reporter and what real-life experience a reporter has. A reporter goes to Rutgers or goes to Yale or Princeton and then goes to the Columbia School of Journalism and then gets a job in the New York Times and works his way up. That reporter has never seen a piece of daylight of Americana. That person has never held a real job. That person's never run a business, has no concept of the free market system. So many left-wingers are that way today. I remember the story about George McGovern, who, when he left office, started a bed and breakfast, and because of regulations, it went out of business. And he said, if only I had known the consequences of my actions. Well, they have no concept of consequences. You've got these punks. These are 20, 30-year-old punks who don't know a lick about the oil industry passing judgment on the oil industry. They don't have a lick of economic sense, and they're telling you that Joe Biden's America is doing very well economically. They don't have a problem with mortgage rates. They make very nice ka-ching in New York and Washington, D.C. They don't have families. They don't have children. They don't have responsibilities. But out there in real America, where you have families and you have children, like my children have their children, they're struggling when the price of gas has gone up under Joe Biden, has gone up 46%, when inflation has gone from 1.9%, which was the average under Donald Trump. He brought it down to 1.4. Biden took it to 5.5. When you've seen mortgage rates go up 156%, where people can't buy homes. That's real America. People in Washington, D.C. don't have that problem. They just rent apartments and live the good life and go out to restaurants and Starbucks every single day. That's a false economy. In the real world, which these reporters have never visited, it's quite different and it's quite tragic.
Mm-hmm. All right, my friend, keep up the great work. We need you and your folks now more than ever. If people want to help, the Media Research Center support at work.
I was going to say the same thing.
Oh.
I was going to say the same thing. America needs you more than ever.
Well, you're very kind. If people want to help Media Research Center, now more than ever, I might add, where do they go, Brent Bozell?
They can go to mrc.org or newsbusters.org and sign up. There's all sorts of ways you can give money, but sign up and become part of a movement.
All right. God bless you, my friend, and your family. Give my best to everybody.
Thank you, Mark.
All right. You know, folks, I remember the independent counsel law expired in 1992. But they resuscitated it. But what do I mean they resuscitated? Well, it expired, but there were investigations that went on for years and years and years. Now, do you know why the independent counsel statute died? The independent counsel statute was a horrendous statute. It was unconstitutional, but there was only one justice who ruled that it was unconstitutional. It was in the minority who wrote it was unconstitutional. You might guess who it was, Antonin Scalia at the time. Clarence Thomas wasn't on the court then. Neither were Alito or Gorsuch, of course. I'd met Neil Gorsuch's mother. She was a wonderful, wonderful lady. She headed the EPA, and of course they were out to destroy her too. But nonetheless, it was when the Republicans used the independent counsel statute against the Democrats. That's when they decided to let the statute expire, because the Democrats realized it was a double-edged sword. What I'm trying to say is Republican DAs and Republican attorneys general need to start putting on the brass knuckles legally and take it to the Democrats, because I don't, as a practical matter, all the courts aside, as a practical matter, they fight with, as I said at the beginning of the program, with brass knuckles, and we fight with mittens. Okay, we're going to lose the country if we keep that up. Maybe I speak as somebody who comes out of Landmark Legal Foundation with a great president there now, Pete Hutchison. I was president for a good long while. Now I'm chairman, because this is how we litigate there. But apparently it's not how other lawyers litigate. I mean, I'm not talking about conservative legal groups. I'm talking about, lawyers out of law firms, lawyers who advise candidates. You got to get down and dirty. There's nothing illegal or wrong with it. What am I on, Mr.? Oh, yes, indeed. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Let me close the program the way I started. Yes, there will be a period where you're down. Some will be distraught. What happened today and what's happened the last 6 weeks, and in fact, what's happened the last, frankly, 8 years, from the moment Donald Trump came down that escalator, is a disgusting disgrace. The Democrat Party is not a normal political party. It's an autocratic party. I wrote an entire book on it. The Democrat Party hates America. Can't say I didn't warn everybody. Sentence after sentence, paragraph after paragraph, page after page, chapter after chapter. I guess I'll have to update it, although there's an entire chapter on what they've been doing to Donald Trump and the Constitution. But let me be very clear about this. Our country is being destroyed from within, not from foreign enemies. From within. The very danger that the framers tried to avoid. Although John Adams said, liberty without virtue is tyranny. Well, they lack virtue, don't they? The criminalization and politicization of our justice system on behalf of one party and one candidate is the thing of tyrants and totalitarian regimes. The vast majority of the media celebrating this is the thing of tyrants and totalitarian regimes. We've seen the Hitler Youth in the streets. We've seen evil, which is said to be good, and good, which is said to be evil. We've seen horrendous things. We, the people, have one way to take this back, and that's in November. And that's only a start. We've got a long way to climb here. We salute our armed forces, police officers, firefighters, emergency personnel, our truckers, our brothers and sisters in Ukraine, our brothers and sisters in Israel. We have your back. And you, the great American people, you patriots and Levinites, God bless each and every one of you, and I'll see you on Fox in a half hour.